All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Like Emily said, my name is Josh Bendorf. I work as a outreach specialist within the Wisconsin State Climatology Office, which is also a part of the Division of Extension. So Emily and I are colleagues and that we are both Extension employees. Before I get started here today in my presentation, which is going to be a very brief presentation on Wisconsin's climate past, present, and future, there is a quick Zoom poll question that I would like to ask you all just to get a feel for the room today. So, what changes in climate have you noticed in your community in recent years? This is just a short answer, so just maybe in a couple words. We'll maybe leave this open for about, let's just say about a minute here. And if you guys want to pop your answer into that, we'll take a look at those in a minute. We have two people respond. Let's see if we can get a few more. Another 15 seconds here. All right, Emily, why don't we go ahead and close it? Looks like we got four responses. I'm not able to see the replies on my end, Emily, so could maybe you read some of those?
Yes. So one is excessive rains in short periods of time.
Hmm.
Another one is a strong drought and heavy rain cycles. Wetter wets and drier dries, and some different plants and pests, and more intense storms and hotter nights.
All right, thank you for all those responses. And those fit with a lot of things that I and others at the State Climatology Office have heard a lot of questions about, a lot of talk about those things, and I'll be covering those in my presentation. So hopefully give you all a little bit more context of some of the bigger picture things that we're seeing in Wisconsin. I get my slides to advance. There we go. So my agenda today for my talk is first I'll give an overview of the State Climatology Office, assuming that some of you might be hearing of the State Climatology Office for the first time. So I want to give you a flavor as to the things that we do and what we offer the people of Wisconsin. Next, I'm going to give a quick recap of the spring of 2026 because there was a lot that went on during the spring of 26. I'm going to talk about some recent trends that we've seen in Wisconsin's climate, recent being the last several decades or so, what we've been seeing in that period of time leading up to current day. Then I'm going to look a little bit into the future. We're going to get out our crystal ball and we're going to look a little bit into the future. So, some projections from some climate modelers at UW-Madison that we work with. So, what are they thinking might happen in the future? And then, as a good segue into Michelle's presentation, I'm going to talk about some resources that can help guide action on your farm, or for those of you who work with farmers, those of you resources for the growers that you work with. So, firstly, how does the State Climatology Office serve the people of Wisconsin? You can see the URL to our website there on the bottom part of your screen. Emily just put it into the chat. So, if you want to check out that website, there's a lot of great resources in there, data resources, data plotting tools, historical real-time information for the state of Wisconsin, as well as some great educational tools. We have a couple blogs that we maintain on our website. So, a lot of great things there. Highly encourage you all to check that out. Our mission overall at the State Climatology Office is to offer climate services that help people, the people of Wisconsin, use weather and climate information most effectively. And there's a couple different ways that we do this. One is providing stakeholders with reliable weather and climate information. So we've been keeping track of Wisconsin's weather at the State Climatology Office for well over 100 years, going back before the year 1900. So we have a lot of information available for climate data for the state of Wisconsin. And for not just like in the major cities, but all across Wisconsin's 72 counties. But we don't want to just provide folks with climate information, say, here you go, figure out what to do with it. We want to help stakeholders understand and apply climate information. So that's where our interpretation pillar comes in and is a big part of my position. And a great example of that is what we're doing today, presenting this information to you all as vegetable crop growers and helping you all understand what we're seeing in Wisconsin. Thirdly, investigation. Sometimes at the SCO, we get asked questions that are a little bit harder to answer, things that maybe aren't as simple as, oh, what was the weather like 10 years ago? It's more like more in-depth things. People are noticing all kinds of different trends, impacts. Sometimes we get asked things that are a little bit harder to answer, and we need to do a little bit more digging. So that's where investigation comes in, basic and applied research on Wisconsin's climate. So now to get into a recap of this past spring, we're going to talk about March, April, and May. The month of March was warmer and wetter than normal across pretty much across the board in Wisconsin. It wasn't record temperatures or record precipitation by any means. Things just kind of swung a little bit in that direction, warmer and wetter to start out the spring. But things really ratcheted up once we got into the month of April, especially with precipitation. It was actually for the state of Wisconsin our wettest April on record. And across counties in Wisconsin, pretty much all counties, folks saw 2 to 3 times their normal amount of precipitation. So take what the average precipitation, what would you expect to get for precipitation in the month of April? Multiply that by about 2 or 3, and that's what we got in the month of April this year. The map on the right here, this is precipitation rankings by county for the state of Wisconsin. So looking at roughly about 130 years of data that NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, has, and how 2026 stacked up amongst all of those years. These counties here that we see in the dark green colors, those are the counties that had their wettest April on record. And there were a lot of other counties that didn't set a record but ranked pretty high. Those counties that are a little bit less dark. So pretty much across the board, extremely wet April. Another interesting statistic for the month of April that it was actually our most severe month on record. So if we look at the combined number of severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings, and flash flood warnings for 1 month and combine that all together, we have these statistics going back to 2005. April of 2026 was by far our most severe, with more than 40 more warnings than our most recent record, which was set back in 2005. But then come May, the faucet kind of shut off, and we've had a very dry May for the most part in Wisconsin. We were talking about this a little bit before you all hopped on here today, but 2026 statewide average for the month of May is about 1.5 inches of precipitation, only about 1.5 inches. For most folks, that's less than half of the normal amount of precipitation that we would expect to get for May. And down where Michelle is, those folks have seen like 25% or less of average precipitation. So it's been very dry. And you might start hearing more and more talk about drought in the near future if we don't get some substantial rains over the next few weeks. So something to keep an eye on. So zooming out a little bit, looking at our whole record of temperatures in the state of Wisconsin. The plot you see here on my slide is Wisconsin annual average temperature going back to 1895. 1895 kind of being the first year of record keeping for climate data in the state of Wisconsin. Back in the days when the U.S. Weather Bureau was formed, and not too long after that, it became what we know now today as the National Weather Service. So we have about 130 years worth of climate data going back for the state of Wisconsin. What we see here is a couple interesting things that jump out at us from this chart. One being the trend. If we do a linear regression on this data, so what is our upward, downward trend in the data? We see that we have an upward trend of about 0.2 degrees per decade. So it's been warming by about 1 degree Fahrenheit every 50 years, average annual temperatures in Wisconsin. So we've gained a few degrees Fahrenheit in temperatures since pre-1900. Another thing that jumps out at us, if we look at like the kind of the concentration of where we have some of our warmest years compared to we have some of our coldest years, we see that the 2010s and 2000s were our top 2 warmest decades on record. So not every year was warmer than the last in a warming trend. We do still have cooler years, but they don't happen as often. And we're seeing that our warmest years are getting higher and higher on that chart. Breaking this down by season. So the maps you see here on the right, that's the historical change in daily average temperature at the county level from 1950 to 2024. These are maps that were put together by our partners over at the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, or WICI. And what we see when we look at things in this way, we see that all seasons and counties have warmed to some degree. And winter really jumps out at us as the season that has warmed the most. And that's pretty much true across the board, across all of Wisconsin's counties. If we look at the winter map, we see a lot of the orange, darker orange colors that indicates a warming of about 5 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit between 1950 and 2024, compared to other seasons is kind of more in that 2 to 4 degree range. Looking at precipitation, so similar maps as before, but now we're looking at precip. Winter, spring, and fall, most counties have gotten wetter. We see most of the counties are showing up in that kind of that blue-green color, indicating increased precipitation over that time period. What's interesting is summer. Summer's been kind of more of a mixed bag depending on where you're at in Wisconsin. Southern and central counties have gotten wetter or significantly wetter, but it's gotten a little bit drier across northern Wisconsin. We look at that northern tier of counties, we see more of those counties shaded in brown. So there's been a little bit of a drying trend up in the northern counties. Not a huge drying trend by any means, but things are kind of looking in that direction. I've talked with a few of my colleagues here at UW. I think the jury's still out as to why exactly this has been going on, but just making you aware that there is a little bit of a drying trend in northern Wisconsin during the summer months. So similar plot as before, if we look at the whole record of Wisconsin annual average precipitation going back to 1895, we see some similarities with the temperature trend. If we look at the slope of the trend from 1895 to 2025, we see things are getting wetter by about 1 inch per every 30 years. So again, gained a few inches in annual average precipitation over this time period. The 2010s really jump out at us here as being the wettest decade by far. The year 2019 was actually the wettest year in Wisconsin. You see that dot up here almost at 45 inches. But look at the number of dots that are higher up on the chart during the 2010s. And a lot of them are kind of above that long-term average, that long-term trend line. So even though we're not setting a record every subsequent year, we're still getting a lot more of the years that rank higher on the spectrum. So it's useful to look at precipitation in terms of averages, but we also want to look at extreme events. A lot of you mentioned in my poll question at the beginning that you're really thinking about extreme events, you're noticing them in your area. So we look at trends and patterns in those as well. You might have heard the term 100-year rainfall event before, so we've done a little bit of work with this, looking at 100-year daily rainfall events in Wisconsin, particularly in recent years. The map you see here on the right is 100-year rainfall events in Wisconsin and the amount of rainfall that corresponds to a 100-year rainfall event. So for example, if we look at Dane County down here in the southern part of the state, a 100-year rainfall event for Dane County is 6 inches. So basically what we're saying is we'd expect one 6-inch or more rainfall event in Dane County to occur every 100 years, or you have about a 1% chance of getting a rainfall event like that in any given year. But what's really interesting about the 2010s is that these events weren't super rare. We got quite a few of these events all across Wisconsin during the 2010s. We had 21 of these events that met the 100-year criterion between 2010 and 2019. And each one of these dots here on the map with a corresponding number is an individual one-day precipitation total that met that threshold. A lot of them in the southern and western parts of the state, but all parts of Wisconsin were affected by these. And this is part of a larger trend that we're seeing both in Wisconsin and in the larger Midwest, that we're seeing a higher fraction of our annual precipitation amounts coming during these really intense, high impact rainfall events. So we're seeing a trend towards more of these events occurring over time. A little bit of atmospherics lesson for you all here on why we're seeing this. It's really a result of a warmer atmosphere. So as our temperatures continue to warm, as our atmosphere continues to warm, warmer air can hold more water vapor. It has the capacity to evaporate more water, hold more water that can form into clouds and can form into precipitation. So for every 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature, we expect there to be about a 4% increase in the water vapor holding capacity of our air. So we have more moisture in our air. that can fall out as precipitation. So we get like something that causes that warm, moist air to rise, form into storms. There's more water there that can rain out. That can happen as rain during the summer months, but it can also happen as heavier snowfall events in the winter if one of these, if we get like a winter storm, for example. One thing we've also noticed, and some of you mentioned this in your responses to my question, is that we've been seeing a lot of ping ponging with precipitation, a lot of back and forth. We have those really wet periods, but in between, we have a lot of dryness as well. This plot here you see on this slide is the precipitation anomaly by month going back to January of 2023. So where we have green bars, those are months that were wetter than normal, and yellow bars, those are months that are drier than normal. And the height of the bar represents how much above or below normal we had. And we can see how much flip-flopping we had just in a short time period. So looking at January through April of 2023, we actually had our second wettest January through April period on record. But then once we got into May and June, things quickly swung to the other direction. And we went to having our fourth driest May through August on record. So top 10 wettest, top 10 driest, all in the span of about 8 months. Looking at 2025, we've had a lot of this too, going from our third driest January on record to our sixth wettest March on record to our eighth driest September through November on record. And lo and behold, 2026 is showing very similar signal. We had our wettest March through April on record wettest April, but now with May's looking like it's going to rank higher on the drier end of the spectrum. So again, a lot of this up and down, back and forth. So we've been seeing increasing precipitation over time, but there's been a lot of up and down along that trend. This has implications for drought. So this is a time series of drought going back to 2023. We see the different levels of severity in drought, everything from D0, just abnormally dry, all the way up to D4, exceptional drought. And the height of this line shows the percent of Wisconsin that was covered by each one of these drought categories. What we see, so remember how I mentioned that January through April of 2023 was our second wettest on record. So that high amount of precipitation through those couple months, we had no drought by the time we got to April and May of 23. But once that precipitation shut off and we got into summer, look how quickly drought onset in the state of Wisconsin and how steep some of those lines are, especially if this happens during the summer months where we have more demand for moisture, plants are taking up more water from the soil, actively growing. That's the water demand is going to be higher. And if we get into a droughty period, drought can onset very quickly. And you see again, the flip-flopping that we had. So if we go back to 2025, sixth wettest March on record and above normal precipitation in June and July, again, we see how we whittled drought down in the state. But then once we got into fall and things got dry again, sure, lo and behold, drought came back. So again, we see a lot of flip-flopping again between having hardly any drought in the state to drought being an issue, and it can onset in a very short period of time. So that was in the past. Let's talk a little bit about the future. So like I said, we have some folks who are a part of Wiki who do some climate modeling for the state of Wisconsin to kind of give us an idea of what we could expect a few decades down the road. What we're seeing for temperatures pretty much across the board in Wisconsin is continued warming. All seasons and counties will likely continue to warm. So the values you're seeing on these maps, if you take our current averages where we're at now and add like 4 or 5 degrees to it, that's kind of what we're expecting by the time we get to the middle of the century, 2041 through 2060. And winter is expected to be the season that will continue to be the season of highest warming, about 5 degrees Fahrenheit, compared to about 3 to 4 for the other seasons. One thing I do want to point out is these are by no means a guarantee. They're modeled, they're projections based on the estimated levels of greenhouse gases that we expect to be in our atmosphere by these given years. It could be higher, could be lower, and that's going to affect our modeling results. But this is for a moderate level of increase in emissions over the next few decades. So a similar scenario for precipitation, increases in seasonal precipitation during winter, spring, and fall by about 5 to 10 degrees. So kind of, again, a kind of a continuation of what we have been seeing in recent decades, just kind of the trend is going to continue on is what the modeling is expecting, is showing for us. Summers may actually get a little bit drier, though, expected to be about 5% drier for pretty much all folks in Wisconsin. So summer kind of stands out as the anomaly. But what I do want to point out is that summer is also the season where we're most likely to see extreme precipitation events. And even though summers are looking like they're going to be a little bit drier, what we're seeing is we might be seeing a higher quantity of our rainfall events occurring during high impact, heavy rainfall events, with virtually everywhere likely to see more frequent heavy rainfall by the time we get to mid-century. It's not a huge increase by any means. On average, it's about an increase of about one event per decade that for Wisconsin counties. But again, they're already being problematic at their current level, so it's kind of more of the same or a little bit of an increase. So lastly, before I turn the floor over to Michelle, I want to give you a few resources, a few takeaways from my presentation today. Again, I would highly encourage you all to check out our State Climatology Office website. We talk a lot more in depth about all these things on our website. But some recommendations for you as you walk away today. One is to locate your nearest Wisconet station. If you're not already familiar with Wisconet, these are weather and soil monitoring stations that are available across all of Wisconsin's 72 counties. You see pretty much across the board here, we have stations statewide where these black dots are. So go on to the Wisconet website, which is in the chat, and find the station that's nearest to you. The data for these stations, there's all kinds of data and they update every 5 minutes. So it's real-time information that you can use. Secondly, I would strongly recommend that you subscribe to the weekly ag weather outlooks for Wisconsin. Emily has been a contributor to these, as well as Anastasia Kurth from Crops and Soils. These are weekly summaries of what we've been seeing in Wisconsin's weather over the past week or so, how that's affected soils and crops in the state, our outlook for the next week to a few weeks, all the way out to the seasonal level. So we look into the future a little bit. But what's been a great addition to these is agronomic recommendations that we get from Anastasia and Emily and their colleagues for row crops, specialty crops like vegetables and fruits. So these are actionable things, recommendations for you, things to consider based on current and projected climate. Thirdly, I would highly encourage you to take a look at a USDA report that came out a couple years ago. This is Climate Change Impacts on Wisconsin Agriculture. I was actually a contributor to this publication. This is going to talk a lot about the similar things to I talked about today, historical and projected climate change, as well as impacts to agriculture, but it also provides a little bit of a roadmap for what you can do to be more resilient on your farm, provide some recommended practices. So we had some agronomy and conservation folks contribute to this document with some practices, things that could help increase resilience on your farm. Not meant to be farm specific recommendations by any means, but just some things to consider with you and your trusted advisors of what could work on your farm. And then lastly, similarly to the USDA report, I would highly encourage you to take a look at some of the more recent wiki assessment reports that have come out. There was a comprehensive one in 2021 and a shorter update to that report that came out just a few months ago in 2026, and especially focus in on the agriculture section. These reports, again, similarly to the USDA report, we have climate and agriculture experts from the state of Wisconsin who wrote this, talking about impacts to ag and what you can do to help increase resiliency on your farm. And so with that, that is all I have for you today. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I'll take a look to see if there's any questions in the chat, but if you can hang on till the end, I'll be available for some questions. And there's my email address. I'll also put that in the chat, but I'll pass it back to Emily.
Does anyone have any immediate questions for Josh? Josh, I'm actually curious. The projected reports for Wisconsin, how often are those updated?
Yeah, that's a great question, Emily. I think for the most part, they've updated those every time that they have done a like a one of the wiki assessment reports. So the map that I show here, I think those are from the 2026 update that just came out. So the folks that are part of the climate team at Wiki, which I'm also a part of, they'll update those for those reports, but I think they'll also update them every year as well, like on the website. They'll update the averages and yeah, I think they'll rerun the model simulations again. But for the last few years, it's been for that mid-century time period, that 2041 to 2060.
Thanks so much, Josh. Any other initial questions? Otherwise, we'll have plenty of time at the end as well. Okay, I think we'll pass it off to you then, Michelle.
Hi. Um, Josh, thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I now have some things to sign up for, and that'll be good. So I'm completely different. I am a farmer. I've been a farmer for 18 years, of vegetables. So I think one of the most difficult things to do is the vegetable farming thing, just because it is so diverse. And every single one of those plants wants its own little special world. And that means you have to be a world preparer for all kinds of plants. Um, and I agree. The weather is the single most difficult thing because you have no control whatsoever. You can prepare the perfect bed, you can buy the perfect variety, you can take care of it to the nth degree, but if Mother Nature decides to throw you a loop, you get a loop, and you just have to respond. So how do we do that? How do we respond for our benefit, for our income, for our soil health and our ecology, and for our customers, and not to mention ourselves. And that is what I've been struggling with for the last 18 years. Um, the things I work the hardest on are keeping my soils healthy. And the things that help me the most in being weather resilient are keeping your soil healthy and the ways that we do that. So all kinds of ways that I have learned to do that here. And I will start from the top with the basic, which is roots in the ground. As many days of the year that I can keep healthy, happy plant roots in the ground to cover it as much as I possibly can is what I do. Now, all that being said, it's super hard right now because I had to till in my cover crops. And in general, they were tilled in before we got all the heavy rains. But then I couldn't plant because we had all the heavy rains. And so my cover crops were in and dissolving and weeds were growing. So then I had to till again. And then we got super dry. And then I got to plant. So now I'm planting individual plants that need this much space in soil that's empty and doesn't have roots in the ground. And so it is harder right now to do vegetables because of that. Because I'm doing 6 acres of vegetables at the moment, that makes it hard for me to do any real economical drip or a way to use water in a better manner. So in general, in the past, I have done watering with as dry a grower as I can be. I try really hard not to water outside in the fields. I do have high tunnels. I water in there a lot. And that is usually done with drip in the summertime. In the wintertime, it is done with an overhead sprinkler. In the fields, though, I try not to water. My soil here tends to be, I'm up on a hill. I get the winds like there's no tomorrow. I get really great sun, and when a storm comes, it tends to want to miss me. So I don't get as much rain as the average person. It does like to split right around me for some odd reason. But because of that, and because I cultivate in order to keep weeds down, in order to do vegetable growing, I can't use drip out in the fields. I've tried it multiple times. If I have a contoured row, then the drip gets in the way and I can't destroy all the drip. That just defeats the purpose. So I generally use a really big sprinkler and move it a lot if I have to water. And for this whole month of May, I had about 2 weeks where I said, no, it's going to rain. It's going to rain. It's going to rain. And then I said, no, it's not going to rain. You better get the water out there. So we're transplanting plants into dry ground with a water wheel transplanter. We're adding water. I have added all the fertilizers that I know I need to, which are all whole food fertilizers. I am an organic grower. So we put kelp down and we put seed meals down for nitrogen and we put gypsum down because it's generally um, clay soils. So that all helps with tilth and helps with my plants getting what they need. It works really well in a normal year. Right now, because I put all that stuff down and it was dry, none of it is doing me any good. It's just sitting there. That soil there's no soil moisture in there to break the gypsum off, the calcium from the sulfur. None of that is happening. My plants are not accessing it. So water needed to happen. So we started watering, and it takes a long time to water 6 acres with one big sprinkler and 3/4 inch hose. So I'm just telling you right now, you're not alone if you're in my boat. So we have water field at a time. So every field pretty much is getting watered once a week. Sometimes I can get twice a weekend, but in general, it's once a week. And I water heavy to try to get deep enough so it actually helps me so that I don't have to just do it more often. I don't want it to go down 1/4 inch and find out that I have to do it again in another day. So it's been super bright and sunny. It's been super dry. That's how I've been dealing with water in my fields. So for drought, that is basically my thing. I'm too big to use straw. I don't have a ton of equipment. I don't have a ton of money. I grow organic vegetables, and that's where that part goes. But as soon as I can get open ground, I start again with either another crop or another cover crop, and we keep the soil as much growing healthy roots as we possibly can, and that holds moisture in the ground. My cover crop this year of rye tilled in later. It looks like a straw field out there. It looks like I mulched it because there's just been no decomposition because there's been no moisture in the soil. It's just sitting there. Again, like my fertilizers, they're just sitting there. So we are eagerly awaiting the next rain. I have seen a lot of times like this, and I have dealt with these times. In general, this is the only way I found to actually do this without on my property, because I'm not flat, without running drip everywhere and finding out that I can't cultivate and I can't weed everything by hand. So that's part of it. The other thing, when we do get rain, I need to prepare for erosion, and so that we have already done on my property. We have taken many years in being able to afford some heavy equipment to make berms, to make swales on hillsides, to make sure that my property does the least amount of erosion as possible, because I know what I do. I know that I have to till the ground up in order to get a good vegetable crop. I know that I'm going to cultivate around them, and I know that that will mean loose soil. So in general, we have buffers between every field. So we have a nice field that's just so big, so a 100-foot field approximately, and then there'll be a nice big 10, 20-foot buffer that is all grasses and native forbs. That stays there. It never gets tilled in. It just buffers any runoff that it won't go past there. Again, if I keep roots in the ground, I'm good. If I happen to hit a big heavy rain after I've tilled, I want to make sure that it's not going very far. And that is how all my hillsides are. They all have either a buffer or also swales to hold the water and berms to absorb the water. The berms will stay, the swales and the berms will stay covered with green. Again, grasses, native forbs, any trees and shrubs that I might have, and weeds. But mostly by the time the second year of a bermer, so you're not going to have a ton of thistles on there. You just mainly have you have grasses and forbs, and that is the way it is. After I put in a windbreak over here a couple years ago, it was the same thing. It was a swale and a berm to hold water and to absorb water. The berm actually had a hugelkultur in it. And my intent was, because I lost a greenhouse about 4 years back, 5 years back, the intent was to put a windbreak on this berm to help buffer me from the winds, which come from the southwest. And they're very big because I'm up on a hillside. So my winds tend to be, I tell people I'm in the jet stream over here. But the food forest that I planted on there is still small. And the first year, even though I mulched it really well, I got all the thistles and I got all the bindweed, and they grew up and I pulled, and it didn't matter. This last year, I ran through with a weed whacker, and I am growing back nice grasses and forbs and a lot less thistles because they just really don't want to stay there and compete. They love my ground that I till. The thistles love it because that leaves a nice little open space, and they come up and they say, "Hello, I'm here." And so thistles and bindweed don't go away. It just stays, and it's okay. I pull them, then I cultivate them out, and then they come back. I have not found a way to actually make that work completely, but I do see a lot less aggressiveness from them. So the other thing I do to keep soil in the ground is, instead of tillage, sometimes I can run an undercutter under, like, say, an ending crop. So the end of my cabbages or the end of my broccoli, I can run an undercutter under there, or I can mow that and let that drop. And then I have a little subsoiler that I run behind my 20 horsepower tractor, and they are about 15 to 18 inch subsoiler blades that go down right where my rows are. So I can just subsoil through and get a root zone for my plants. And that has helped me to not have to rototill as often, and that I feel better about. What else? So the wind and the water and the soil health and keeping roots in the ground. Also the succession planting to make sure that there's crops coming. Every crop gets fertilized again the same way. Nutrient. Yep. So the nutrients and the keeping the tilth of your soil. So all those ways that I already mentioned keeps roots in the ground, keeps soil in its own space, and and keeps me from losing things and going backwards. I'm going forwards all the time. What I found is my food tastes better, the nutrient levels better, and in general, I'm holding my own out here, even in a drought like this. This is a hard one. This isn't going away immediately. I don't know if rain's coming this weekend, like they say. But I can keep going like this for, this my pump gives out. I can keep going like this for quite a while and not find that I'm losing. I'm just gonna keep going, treading water. Is there any questions?
I'll chime in really quick.
Yeah,
Michelle,
I'd
what
love
cover
it.
crops do you use? I know you said rye. Are there others that you use as well?
My cover crops are diverse. So I do, matter of fact, I'm putting out buckwheat as soon as I can see some rain on the horizon. I'll see buckwheat. And buckwheat is great for a mass of roots. They build a really nice root mass, and will inhibit weeds just because of that competition. Plus they do the flowers and the bees and all of that stuff. So buckwheat is good, and it can grow in the middle of summer, and you can plant it multiple times of the year. I love it. It does die back in the wintertime, which is also good for some applications. I do rye where I know I don't need to get into the field until later in the spring. Okay. So, and it allows me to start a crop way later in the year. Say I have a late cauliflower coming out, or a late whatever, I can get that tilled in and plant rye and still get a crop of rye and good root penetration before it gets too cold, especially since it's staying warmer a little bit later. We are doing oats in the summertime, and as just a green cover, we do oats in the fall, and then know that that will die back over winter. So if I have an early spring crop going in my successions, whichever field it's going to be, I need to know what's going in there the next time, and then that's the cover crop that'll go in there. The speed of the growth of some crops, like the buckwheat, grows really fast, and if you cut that down before it flowers, you're really good. You're golden, and you can not even tell. I could run that subsoiler right through there and drop transplants in there, and that would be a good way to do things. The rye I like because it tends to be allelopathic, so it tends to stop weeds. Now it's not going to really work on thistles and bindweed, okay, but it will help you with those knotweeds and those redwood pigweeds and those wonderful the winter ones. All the little ones, the annuals that are coming back from seed, those are the ones that you're going to get help with rye, and that I have noticed this year especially. So, and partly because it's dry. So I'm gonna eat my own words here because it's dry, you're not going to get quite as many weeds growing out of seed. They just don't. They know better. They're smarter than we are. So the weeds aren't growing up where I had the rye, and the weeds are not growing down where I had the rye yet. They will, but they take a little bit longer. Gives your crop a chance to get into the ground and get started. Any other questions? Did I hit everybody's? Did I hit everybody's? I hope I didn't talk too fast. I tend to talk fast.
I do the same thing, Michelle, but no, I think you were great, actually. I don't want to butt in if anybody has a question, but I am curious, have you changed any of the crops that you've grown? Is there something that I've heard some growers talk about they can't really grow like broccoli reliably anymore, so they stopped growing that, or some people are moving towards like perennials now, or have you changed anything of what you're growing?
I'm pretty nimble on my feet as far as what I'm growing. Some varieties might have to change. I have changed my ideas of which field things are going in, depending on what I see coming. So I saw some of this coming, and the onions didn't go down in the bottom field because I couldn't reach a hose to that. I said, nope, nope, the onions need to be closer. So we moved the onions up closer. Those are the kinds of changes that I made more. Some things never did well here, and then I've stopped doing those. But in general, and then I start again because I can't really help myself. So squashes were a thing. I did squashes really well at my very beginning days, and then they started to not do so well. The pests were getting worse. And you can build up a pest population, and I had done that. So I stopped growing all cucurbits on this property for 1 year, a full year. I didn't grow a cucumber, I didn't grow a melon, I didn't grow a squash of any kind. I stopped all cucurbits, and that was because I wanted to break my pest cycle. It would have been really, really good if my neighbor wasn't growing them right there. So I ended up getting them back a little bit later in the year, but it did work. It did what it was supposed to do. But this year I have 1,000 squash out there. And it's been the first year that I said, okay, we can do this. And I beefed up that soil. So I beefed it up with a ton of compost and a ton of manures that I could find that were clean manures. I got that all in there, and then we just transplanted them 2 days ago. And honestly, they look pretty good. Aside from me needing to water them right away after we watered them in the first time, I watered them again to make sure because it was really sunny yesterday. They're doing fabulous. The squashes for summer squashes look fabulous. The eggplants, I'm waiting for the flea beetles, but for right now, they look fabulous. And they're getting water at this very moment. So you gotta be nimble as a farmer. And I work really hard to make sure that if it's not my fault, if something fails and there was something I could do about it, then that's my fault. But if it fails and I couldn't have done a darn thing about that, then that's just life. And you get over it and move on. And maybe you till that in. I'm looking at a carrot bed out there right now. And I walked it with this morning with my grandson, and I'm like, I'm not seeing many baby carrots in here. It was a bad time to try to seed outdoor carrots. And I'm like, all right. But then I found some, and I'm like, okay, is that enough? Do I till this bed in and start over again? Or is that enough carrots? So I don't want to do a carrot count. Honestly, how many carrots per foot do I have in there? But I looked and I'm like, maybe we could save this half of the row, and the other half of the row we could replant. That might work. That's just being nimble and trying to figure out what you need and when you need it, and can you do it or not. With all the things against us as farmers, we just got to think outside the box sometimes. And each one of us is so different. What I have for equipment and land is completely different from any farmer, even next door to me. They have a whole different setup, a whole different set of conditions. They're not in the wind like I am. They're sheltered. They have a John Deere Gator. I don't. All of those things. You can use what you have, and you have to work your way through what you're dealt by the weather. That's my advice at this moment. And it's kind of a well-earned advice at this day and age because it's some dry stuff out there right now. Anybody wants to come here, we do tours. And there's explosion of what?
Explosion of purslane in their plots this season.
It does not mind dry. It's a succulent. It loves dry, actually. So you'll see a lot of purslane. In some ways, it's a good weed because it just lays on the ground, but you'll seed to death. If you're not careful, you'll have it forever because it's seeding. As soon as you see those little tiny yellow flowers, that purslane is seeding. So when I pull purslane, and in general, I'm pulling it by hand, I pull it and turn it over so it's on the top and its roots are up. And it cannot reroot on you because it's a succulent. One leaf literally can reroot. And so I turn them upside down as a whole plant, and I use that as a little mulch. That goes right underneath my crop. So if I do have to run a cultivator through there, it's not going to all tangle up everything. But I leave it there near the roots of the thing, and that's a lot of water. That's a lot of protection. They're gooey little gel-filled things. They're wonderful, actually. It's one of my favorite weeds. Cool. And no, you don't have to sell the purslane because nobody really wants to buy it. It is not really a vegetable.
Josh, I'm wondering if you could jump in here for a moment. I've heard people talk about, I mean, Michelle's a little different maybe because she's like up on a hill, but I've heard people mention maybe things have seemed windier. Do we have any data on that?
So I laugh a little bit, Emily, 'cause that's probably the number one question that we've gotten like in the
Yeah.
past year that I've worked for the state climate office. And we've talked about this at length amongst our team. And right now we just don't really have good data to tell us one way or the other. So a lot of our wind measurements that we have in Wisconsin come from airports, at least our longer term data, and how the instrumentation has changed over time, like the height at which we're measuring winds changes over time, like how we've defined a wind gust has changed over time. So all of those things kind of combined just make it really hard to look at like long-term trends. So I think the jury is still out on that one. But one thing that's nice now that we have the WiscoNet network is now we have a network of wind monitoring stations across the state. So maybe after several years of that network being online and all those instruments, same kind of measurements that are being taken, same instrumentation, maybe we can make some more, do some more analysis on wind over time. But unfortunately, not able to really say much other than that at this time.
Thanks, Josh.
My one term for this year, and I told you guys earlier, is I've been calling the weather aggressive this season. This year, 2026. It feels to me like the weather is just trying to eat me alive. Like it's mad. It's a bully. And no matter what it's giving me a lot of it, like giving me mouth. Like it turned into a teenager and now it's all mouthy. So I'm trying really hard to deal with my weather personality lately.
Well, hopefully for any other farmers on the call, it's a little nice to hear you're not alone. And I'd be curious if people are interested, if you're a farmer in more spaces like this to kind of share what you're experiencing on your farm. Maybe vent with each other a little bit and talk about what practices you're implementing to see if it's working well or not for you.
Yep. I believe in community and farmers being in community because no one has everything, and we need to share. We need to share information. We need to share equipment. We need to share time and friendship with each other because this truly is a lonely job.
I will ask one more question. Michelle, I know it's a little dependent on people's farms, but is there a piece of equipment or tool that you think has really made the biggest difference for you?
Oh yeah. So a couple of years ago, we did get a Tillmore cultivating tractor, and along with it, they gifted us prototype water wheel transplanter. And honestly, without those two pieces of equipment, I wouldn't be doing this. That has made me at 64 be able to do farming. Not even kidding. I can change a cultivating piece of equipment by myself. I can lift, tote, carry. I did hose moving for the last week and a half with the Tillmores. I just put the hose on the hitch on the back, the hitch, the ball hitch. I just wrapped it around there and dragged my hose all of the 500 feet it took to get to where I needed to go, so I didn't have to carry it myself. And that would be the single most impressive equipment change to this farm that I've ever had. I love small tools. I do tons of things. I believe strongly in the Japanese hand hoe because we're on our hands and knees half the time. But that Tillmore has kept me in business and allowed me to double what I'm doing. I doubled this year my growing. So I doubled my tomatoes, I doubled my potatoes, I doubled my squashes, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't have done it. I can't do it without the Tillmore and the cultivating that it allows me to do.
I'll have to get out there soon. That sounds exciting.
You should come and see. In general, we try to stay off our hands and knees in the field, but that Tillmore gives us the opportunity to do that. And if you run it, even if you're really getting overgrown with weeds because the rains came at the wrong times, you can cultivate and then go in and your soil is at least broken up enough so that if you have to hoe or hand weed, you can do so in a much easier manner because that's so you've cultivated all around your plants, so that's broken up a little bit more.
Last chance for any questions?
If you're farming, we love you. Keep it up.
Well, thanks so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Josh. This was super helpful. I hope others found it helpful as well.